Hello, everyone. Welcome to Insight Live, an IT Experts Take. My name is Mike Moore, Senior Manager over Infrastructure Portfolio Strategy here at Insight. And today, our goal is to demystify the modern edge. And to do that, we're going to break it into a couple consumable components. We're going to focus on the software-defined WAN aspect, as well as the security services edge, and what it's like when we bring those two things together. So for those that may be joining and have never heard of the modern edge, I'll give you a quick background on that. So really, modern edge is really thinking about all of the infrastructure that it takes to run a modern business and how we're operating that business. So we know we have endpoints and users who are connecting from all over the globe today. We have work from home. We have people in the office. We all know that our clients are trying to unlock the power of data, the data they have within their office productivity tools, within the various data sets from their operations. How are they optimizing that? How are they leveraging that data, putting analytics behind it, and doing really cool use cases, getting into the realm of AI and generative AI. So technology is advancing quicker and quicker. So the underlying infrastructure needs to keep up with that pace to deliver on that innovation. So today we're going to talk about how we can securely connect our endpoints and users to the modern edge. We're going to talk about how we can wrap that in a layer of security and also do so in a very optimized fashion. So joining me in the discussion, we have Mr. David Scherrle, who is our National Channel SE from HPE Aruba Networking. Good morning, David. How you doing, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me today.
Glad to have you. And David is a subject matter expert in the field of SD-WAN, as well as the security services edge. So we are going to lean on David pretty heavily here to help us demystify the modern edge. And I think what we're going to start with is the term SASE, because I know when we bring these things together, that term gets thrown around. So David, maybe you could give us an overview of what SASE is and how it plays into the technologies we're talking about today.
Yeah, there's typically a lot of confusion around that term. So Gartner most recently revamped it a little bit, and what they did was they divided the term SASE into two halves, right? So the first half, you think about more of the left-hand side of the half would be your network half, which might include things like SD-WAN, WAN optimization, network as a service, and just networking vendors as a whole. And then if you look at the right half of it, that would be the security piece, right? And the security piece would be the security service edge, or SSE as we call it for short. And so that might include the things like your cloud hosted secure web gateways, any type of network security, your cloud access security brokers, your VPN technologies, and your more modern ZTNA, zero trust network access type of design. So that from a high level is what we call SASE.
Yeah, perfect. And I mean, so the intent is to really break this up for everyone listening today. So let's start with SD-WAN, which was on the left side of your little diagram that you drew for us there. So really, when we talk about SD-WAN, what's driving the adoption there? And I mean, is it really better than the traditional route switch topologies that we have today?
Oh, most definitely. And it's not just one driver, right? There's really a bunch of drivers, and it could be, for one example, customers that want to lower their circuit costs, right? That's something that SD-WAN can achieve because essentially we can take public internet circuits, right? And we can treat those like they're private circuits, and that is a significant potential reduction in costs, right? Another point might be customers that are looking for better application performance, right, for both cloud apps and maybe privately hosted data center apps, right? Another use case, application awareness, granular visibility into what's on the customer's networks, right? So being able to see this information means that we can use this information and we can steer users and we can steer traffic as desired. And maybe that's giving them priority, or maybe it's not giving them priority because they're a guest user, right? Or a contractor, whatever it might be. And one of the biggest things that I think is often overlooked is the savings that would be associated with a reduced hardware footprint. If you look at the legacy branch location as a whole, typically you might have one ISR or router that connects to your ISP, and then you'd have a firewall, or maybe you got two routers and two firewalls because you've got high availability, and then you've got a WAN optimization device. That's potentially five pieces of hardware, right? So be able to to pull all that out of there and condense it into possibly one or two, if you want a high availability, edge devices, think about the savings in contracts, outage windows, device failures, and so forth. So, right, a lot of savings associated with it from that aspect as well.
Yeah, and actually, we released a Foundry survey just this year that really talked about the number one focus for organizations that we surveyed, and there was 500 plus organizations, different verticals, and they were really focused on optimizing the technology they have. And I mean, listening to the stack that you have to have in a traditional network when you're trying to do offloading like that, where you may have to have a firewall to do direct internet breakdown or things like that. I mean, that is a huge cost savings when we come to the consolidation perspective, and just legacy infrastructures in general, right? When we start to modernize. So, I mean, that sounds like a couple good use cases for us. So the ROI of being able to consolidate circuits, reducing the footprint that you have within the space. I mean, that's going to cause power consumption. You're saving rack space, device count. I mean, any other key use cases that you're really seeing with your clients? Or I know you focus on the Aruba Edge Connect portfolio, specific to Edge Connect in general, even.
Right. So, I mean, use case in general, I think to myself, what makes it better than a traditional route switch architecture, right? And, you know, I think to kind of wrap up some of the points in the last question was that if you look at, you know, your traditional route switch architectures, right, typically they're going to lack a lot of the things we had mentioned. They're going to lack visibility. They're going to lack that ability to steer mission critical applications and provide treatment, right? They're hard to configure. Oftentimes they lack automation, which increases your go-to-market, turning up locations, et cetera, right? They're just archaic in general.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of SD-WAN solutions out there today, right? So what really makes an SD-WAN solution the right choice for a company? I mean, are there certain features, benefits that we should look for when we're selecting an SD-WAN platform?
Yeah, so that's a funny thing. You know, a lot of times, I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but I think the term SD-WAN gets a little muddy because a lot of vendors have a different version of what it is. And when I look at some SD-WAN platforms, I really, I feel like they're just a glorified policy-based routing type of configuration, maybe that's offered in the GUI. And really, they lack application awareness, or it's very manual, and it kind of gives SD-WAN a bad name, right? So I think, you know, some of the things that you should be looking for when you're in the market for an SD-WAN solution is just to make sure that you know, first and foremost, they actually offer SLAs for your mission critical traffic, right? They should give 100% visibility into what's going on in your network, and they should offer ease of administration and configuration, and not difficulty doing so. You know, some vendors, they might have been security centric vendors, and then they tacked on SD-WAN into their platform. And is it really SD-WAN? It might do some of what the customer is looking to accomplish, but in many ways, I look at some of those vendors and I think, well, you know, if it's a firewall, a native firewall, and they tacked on SD-WAN, well, then what are the SLAs actually concerned with? I think the SLAs on that box are pointed more towards what they're doing from a security point of view, and not so much with what they're doing with your application traffic, right? And making sure that traffic is delivered appropriately if it's defined as mission critical, and so on and so forth. And like I said, the application awareness is a huge piece. If you look at the Edge Connect Enterprise, we have an application database which is constantly evolving, and it's thousands and thousands and thousands of applications deep. Many SD-WAN vendors, they just don't have that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, those super great points. And I love the security aspect too, because and it's a good segue into our SSE conversation, because I've heard that the next gen firewall could potentially be dead. I mean, everything's moving to the cloud. Security needs to be closer to the endpoints data. So, I mean, I don't know if that's the case. I've seen some data around that, but the security services edge is a really interesting conversation. I know Aruba or HPE recently made an acquisition in the space, so Access Security, that we're going to be switching gears to talk about next. So maybe you could give us kind of a general overview of what SSE is. I think you touched on it a little bit in the SASE definition, but general overview and some of the technologies and functionalities that we have in that space to kind of start moving from that on-prem model to the cloud-based.
So from my perspective, particularly, especially so with our platform, SSE really has four major components that I like to explain. And the first component would be the zero trust network access, and we call it ZTNA for short. And typically how I like to explain that is it's a replacement for your legacy VPN solutions, right? It's going to provide that client and potentially clientless access to private or public resources, okay? And the way it's better is that you no longer have to have a firewall connected to your data center, which has an open port, okay, with a potentially always on VPN solution. That's going to increase your attack surface as a whole. So we leverage the ZTNA functionality to kind of displace that. The next piece of an SSE solution would be your secure web gateway. So essentially a secure web gateway, we call it SWG or SWG for short, is like a cloud hosted firewall, so to speak, and it's going to block malware. It's going to block unacceptable or unapproved web pages. And essentially what it's going to do, it's going to firewall all traffic going in and out of your endpoints, regardless of where they are. So if they're at the cafe working today, they're working from home, maybe they're even working in the office, whatever the case is, all the traffic to and from that endpoint is going to assuredly go through that secure web gateway, okay? Now, you can leverage the secure web gateways from a location as a whole. So when I look at the SD-WAN piece, let's say you had an SD-WAN appliance at your branch location, you could choose to send all or some of your internet-bound traffic directly over to the secure web gateway from the Edge Connect appliance, right? So we integrate with the secure web gateway as well from that perspective. The next piece would be what we call the Cloud Access Security Broker, all right? So the Cloud Access Security Broker, or CASB for short, is essentially how we're going to control access and potentially prevent data loss to your SaaS apps, right? So the example I like to give is, let's say you have Dropbox, for example. Maybe you've got a corporate account to Dropbox, and so you would allow folks to use Dropbox, and you allow them to upload to Dropbox and download to Dropbox. But what happens if they log on to another organization's Dropbox? Maybe you don't want to allow that. So we can get very granular and say, well, if you log on to somebody else's Dropbox, maybe you're only allowed to download, but no way are you able to upload. Okay.
Right.
The next piece, the last piece, is a digital experience monitoring, and essentially high level, without getting too deep, the digital experience monitoring gives us the ability to monitor your application performance as it traverses through the cloud, right? So maybe for day 2 support, they're getting complaints, or maybe it's just a single complaint, application performance, something like that. So digital experience monitor is going to allow you to kind of look at the path. Is it a network issue? Is a path suffering? Or maybe one of your endpoints, maybe the fellow who called in with a complaint, his endpoint has a problem, so I can see very clearly that maybe there's a resource contention issue or something along those lines on his endpoint. So high level, those are kind of the four pillars, so to speak, of the SSE solution.
Yeah, and that's a great overview of the technology. And I mean, I know there's some use cases that kind of tie into what you talked about there. Maybe you can cover some of those. I know we've seen some pretty interesting use cases for SSE solutions. Curious what you're really seeing, top drivers or big benefits that clients are getting that are moving to SSE.
So I think the biggest driver or biggest initiative in the beginning with any conversation with the customers typically tends to be the ZTNA piece, right? The ZTNA piece, again, the ability to displace those legacy VPN solutions, which, as I've mentioned previously, they kind of increase your attack surface. So we want to get those out of there, right? And then usually that lends itself to opening up a conversation about the secure web gateway piece. How do we secure our endpoints? We struggle with securing our endpoints because we've got users all over the place. They're not just in the office anymore, right? So the secure web gateway usually lends itself to that conversation. And when I think about the whole thing holistically, what are the drivers of SSE? I mean, there's many drivers of it, right? But ultimately speaking, it's going to reduce your infrastructure costs. It's going to be able to allow you to get those legacy appliances out of there, right? Could be a consolidation of tool sets, a consolidation of security services, right? Many organizations, they've got combinations of maybe on-prem or off-prem URL filtering, firewalls, VPN concentrators, you name it, right? So to be able to consolidate that really spells out the ability to drastically increase your overall security posture, okay, while realizing a significant decrease in spend.
Yeah, and that's the exact same things we're seeing with our clients too, David. So, I mean, from a consolidation perspective, I love the fact that when you move to an SSE solution where it's in the cloud, you talked about that stack of security appliances that we used to have on-prem, right? That could have been at the data center. Maybe you had your next-gen firewall. Maybe you had an IPS IDS. Maybe you had your, I don't know, pick your next security project there, but you had to do all of those in line. So you process one, process the next. So it was very a layered approach to security. So that introduced time and latency into the security conversation and in processing of that data. But when you get to the cloud, you get that dual processing. So you can do all these functionalities at the same time. So definitely a key use case. WAN transformation, which you touched on, another big one that we see as well. So people, our clients that are adopting SD-WAN or organizations that are looking to provide that secure connectivity that don't necessarily want to have a firewall at all the locations, or they don't want to manage the security configurations at each of the different boxes or from the security solution. And that's going to get us into a philosophical discussion a little bit later.
Oh, right. Policy, right? Policy. I mean, that's the other thing with some of the legacy architectures is the policy management and being able to easily enforce policy across all your users, regardless of where they are. The legacy architectures from both the SD-WAN perspective and the SSE perspective, that's a problem, right? And that's another thing that we can address by going to a modern SD-WAN/SSE network architecture.
Yeah, not to mention just cloud scalability. I mean, I know a lot of this really started getting popular and we saw the adoption really take that hockey spike 2020 when we saw a lot of the remote workforce spin up. So, I mean, being able to deliver security services and connectivity services from the cloud where you don't necessarily need infrastructure to put in place, like scaling up that next-gen firewall or your VPN head-in at the data center, extremely beneficial. All you have to do is push out agents to all the different laptops in your environment, and then you have that connectivity. So almost an overnight solution in some instances. Another interesting use case that I think you and I talked about was around contractors.
Contractors.
Could you talk on that one?
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing, actually. So, I mean, when you think about the legacy VPN solutions, you've got contractors that maybe you've got an evolving amount of laptops. And you've got hundreds or thousands of contractors coming and going from your organization on a yearly basis. I mean, we've had use cases with regards to the with the ZTNA functionality, where customers are complaining like, look, I can't keep up with contractors that are onboarded for 30 days or 90 days, and that means we have to format a laptop, ship it out, then worry about getting it back just to get these contractors access to a couple of things that they need on the network. Maybe it's an SSH server, maybe it's a RDP, something like that, whatever the case is. So now with the new ZTNA functionality that we offer within our product portfolio, you don't need to do that anymore. So let's just say you've got a use case of contractors, as I said before, they need access to an SSH server, RDP, maybe some other things, right? you can provide that access agentlessly, which means that you basically can give them a web browser on any device and add whatever apps they need to access through that web browser, and they can use their own equipment. So you no longer have hundreds or thousands of laptops being formatted, shipped around, and concerned about, right? Potentially huge savings, quicker to get your contractors in, easier to revoke their access. If a contractor is revoked, it takes 1 minute to go into the console, revoke that access. And since that access is constantly mediated, as I like to call it, 30 seconds after I revoke access, even if that potential user has an active session somewhere, it's going to be terminated. So again, increasing the security posture, reducing your costs significantly.
Yeah, not to mention I've been on the contractor side of the house and receiving some of those laptops, and some were boat anchors and carrying around my laptop and their laptop.
Yeah, I mean, that's for contractors too. It's like I don't have to have, if I work for 2 or 3 different organizations, I don't have to have 3 or 4 laptops that sitting on my desk. It's so super convenient.
Yeah,
everybody prefers to use their own equipment.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I lived in the consulting world for years. So when I had to travel with multiple laptops to client sites, that was always fun, having to go through airport and check those. That's the good use case for getting clear, or a TSA pre-check where you don't have to pull the laptops out of the bag. But I digress there. But let's switch gears. So let's talk more of the better together stories. So obviously, Access came into the portfolio for Aruba this year, which is going to be a game changer. Really rounds out the portfolio you guys have from a SASE perspective. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that integration, because I know you've been really good in the Edge Connect portfolio with integration with other SSEs in the past, the Zscalers, and pick your favorite. You can manually configure stuff. But where are we going with the Access integration within Edge Connect?
So it's already there. So basically, we can tie tunnels into the Edge Connect platform over to the secure web gateway, and we can very easily, in probably 5 minutes time, get that tunnel established, right? So, and then you can pick and choose. For those of you who are familiar with the Edge Connect platform, how easy it is to identify applications. Maybe you want to send certain applications over to the secure web gateway. Maybe you don't, whatever the case is, or maybe just everything as a whole. The service orchestration, it's there. It's already possible at this point. So it's really cool because, as a whole, now we're able to offer that entire SASE portfolio to our customers that kind of want it all under one umbrella, right? Sometimes I say single throat choke, and it's competitive. It's a good platform. In fact, there's many aspects of the platform that some of the competitors they lack. So we're super excited about it.
Yeah, that is awesome. And I know Aruba has a network as a service offering that we're partnering with and building out and getting ready to launch here at Insight. And what I'm hoping, and what we've been talking for with the teams, is that we see those different service packs around wireless, routing, switch, that we'll start to see more of these things like SD-WAN and access come into those. So that's a big hope for me, because I know the consumption models are changing. More people are thinking about network as a commodity, and they really just want that as a service to do all these cool things that we talked about kind of in the beginning, going back to the data conversations, running AI, machine learning, compute. So really focusing on the cool things in the side of the house and delivering a lot of this as a service. So super excited the direction the portfolio is going, for sure. The philosophical debate, and maybe we shouldn't have saved this one for last, because we could probably talk forever about it, is when we talk about these solutions, really the SD-WAN lives in the networking world, right? There are some security components into that in the policy discussion, but SSE is really a security solution. There are some access components of that as well, though, because you're providing access to the users. So
SD-WAN should be secure though too. Sorry to interrupt. So again, when I look at some of the vendors, I like to call our solution the quote unquote the SD-WAN 2.0 solution, right? Because we are heavily tied in with security, and we can do a lot of things with a platform that other vendors may not be capable of doing. So as I mentioned earlier, we can steer traffic based on application, and we can do a lot of different things. But what's really cool about our platform is first of all how we love security. We can integrate with, let's say, ClearPass with our platform, and being able to, by the way, for those of you not familiar, ClearPass is an NAC solution, right? It's a highly advanced NAC solution. And by way of integrating with it, we can receive the security context information. And that security context information might be that a device boots up on the network and we profiled it as an IoT device, or maybe a point of sale terminal. And so that information comes over to the SD-WAN fabric. And now all of a sudden we can say, oh, okay, this traffic is coming from a point of sale terminal. So we're going to do two things with it. First of all, we're going to give it mission critical treatment because it's our bread and butter, but also we're going to segregate it, right? So that anyone else on the network, employees, contractors, they cannot access that segment, so to speak, right? Because that is mission critical, bread and butter. So the ability to do that, like I said, really kind of dubs us into what I like to call that SD-WAN 2.0 scenario. And these, going back to your original inquiry, these are some of the things that you really should look for when you're thinking about SD-WAN, all this advanced feature functionality, not just something plain Jane, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I love that you brought up network access control, because that's another component of the modern edge that we could probably do a whole nother demystifying network segmentation and policy. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, so the policy there, we often joke, and especially around NAC, which reminded me, we joke that we often work as mediation as a service between different teams within our client's business, the security teams, the network teams, the application teams, the endpoint teams. And that all stems from network access control, but very similar in the SD-WAN SSE story, right? Because there is that security policy that needs to be baked into each of these and the different aspects of application security and endpoint security, securing our data that goes into that. So it really is a bringing of these teams together. And I think we've seen a lot of our clients kind of breaking down those silos where we're getting better communication between network and security.
Marriage.
Oh,
yeah, I was just saying it's beginning to be a marriage for sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, when it comes to these transformational projects, I mean, I feel like it could come from anywhere. I mean, talking about the technologies we talked about today, we may have a client that we go into that already has an SSE solution, and they're looking to modernize their WAN infrastructure and move to an SD-WAN solution. And that joining those together gives you the SASE. So, I mean, it could be that this type of project spans or starts at the security team and kind of bleeds into network, or it could be we have a networking solution. You have a security team that has next-gen firewalls all over the environment. They're looking to consolidate and optimize and want to move to a cloud security solution. So, I mean, I think it's pretty interesting and symbiotic how these technologies are coming together. So super excited to see where it's going to head in the future and how it's going to all evolve as everything kind of shakes out. We're probably getting towards the end of the time. I know we could probably talk security and policy forever, but David, I'll leave it to you with one last question. So, I mean, for anyone listening out there today that may be on the SD-WAN journey, that may be looking at SSE, or maybe just wants to go full-blown SASE right out of the gate, what are some things they should consider, or maybe where's the best place to start, in your opinion?
Well, I think the best place to start would be really to take a look at what your infrastructure looks like. Maybe your focus should be on the SSE side. Maybe your focus should be on the SD-WAN side. And I'm not sure there's really a definitive explanation for that. Right? I think it depends on the needs of the organization holistically. But I will say this, it kind of brings me back to the original SD-WAN conversation when we started. You know, if you're not looking at an SD-WAN quote unquote 2.0 solution, there's a real good chance that it could actually be costing an organization money, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, keep that in the back of your head. And again, that security posture, right? This is a real concern these days. I've been in this industry for upwards of, not upwards, 20 plus years. And in most recent years, I think one of the things that people think this could never happen to me, is all the ransomware attacks and all the security issues, right? So
Yeah.
I see it happen all the time. So when I go back to even costing the organization money, a lack of proper security controls and a lack of a potentially appropriate SSE solution as a whole, if it's not costing the organization money now, there's a good chance it will cost money later on.
Yeah. I love it. That's perfect. And David, I really appreciate the time that you spent with us today. And obviously, you are extremely knowledgeable in the subject and could talk about both of these for days. So, I mean, we here at Insight, we deliver on the Aruba Edge Connect portfolio. We integrate with the SSE solutions that you guys are ramping in. So, super excited from just a joint effort between Aruba and Insight. Really happy to have the great partnership. And if anyone is headed down that path of SD-WAN, SSE, SASE, pick your favorite abbreviation soup out there. Happy to continue the conversation. Reach out to your Insight rep or find out more at solutions.insight.com. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, David, and have a great rest of the day.
All right, take care.
Yeah, thanks all.